Ever wonder how some athletes seem to just keep going, like push way beyond what seems normal?
Yeah, it's fascinating. And sometimes the answer isn't what you'd expect. People are looking beyond the usual sports drinks.
Exactly. There's this one ingredient, carbohydrate, actually, that's causing a bit of a stir.
That's what we're diving into today, cyclodextrin. It's this unique carb, and we want to see, what's the science saying? Does it actually help performance?
Right. We've got a couple of key studies here. One looks at CrossFitters, the immediate effects.
And the other is really interesting. It connects a specific type of cyclodextrin to gut bacteria and endurance. They looked at mice and humans.
So for you listening, if you want the important stuff without wading through like endless papers, that's what we do. We pull out the key insights.
Our mission basically is to figure out what the research really shows about cyclodextrin. Is it hype or is there something to it?
Okay, let's get into it. First things first. What are cyclodextrins? These are kind of complex.
Well, they're made from starch, actually. Enzymes break down the starch and then reform these glucose units into a ring structure.
A ring, like a little.
Yeah, think of like a tiny cone or maybe a donut shape with a hollow bit in the middle. It's called a toroidal shape, technically.
Okay, interesting. And I heard they're used in like medicine too.
They are, yeah. They've been used for a while in pharma to help dissolve drugs that don't mix well with water. That hollow center can sort of hold on to the drug molecule.
Huh. So how does that donut shape help athletes?
Well, two main things. The outside of the ring structure makes them dissolve really well in water, which is obviously good for sports drinks.
Makes sense. Easy to mix.
But the bigger deal, maybe, is how they empty from the stomach. Research suggests they move through really fast, almost like water.
Whoa, okay. Like water. That sounds pretty significant.
It could be, yeah. Because think about it, that feeling of stuff sloshing around in your stomach or bloating.
Oh, yeah, that can totally ruin a workout or a race. Terrible feeling.
Exactly. So if cyclodextrins empty faster, they might cause fewer of those gut issues, less gas, less burping, that kind of thing, more comfortable fueling.
Right. I think I saw a mention of a graphic somewhere comparing it. Showing less discomfort.
Yeah, the HSN Store blog highlighted something like that, comparing it visually to other carbs.
Okay, so faster digestion, potentially fewer gut problems. Sounds good in theory. How does it stack up against, say, other common sports carbs, like amylopectin? That also comes from starch, right?
It does, yeah. And there's actually a study that compared them directly. They gave athletes 15 grams of cyclodextrin or 15 grams of amylopectin during a 2-hour workout.
What kind of workout?
It was 30 minutes at a pretty low intensity, like 40% VO2 max, then 90 minutes harder at 60% VO2 max, so sustained effort.
Okay, and the results?
The really interesting bit was the RPE, the rating of perceived exertion. The cyclodextrin group reported feeling like the workout was significantly less hard.
Less hard, on the Borg scale, right?
Yeah.
So for the same actual work, they felt less strained?
That's the idea. The researchers thought maybe it's because the energy from cyclodextrin gets delivered efficiently, plus that faster stomach emptying we talked about. Less digestive stress, maybe.
Easier on the system while still providing fuel. Okay, that makes sense for that kind of endurance workout. But what about something different, like CrossFit? That's more short bursts, high intensity.
Good question. And that brings us to the other study we mentioned. This one looked specifically at the acute effects, like taking it right before workout.
Okay, tell me about that setup.
So they took 21 male CrossFit athletes. It was a proper study design. Crossover, randomized, double-blind, meaning everyone tried both things, 30 grams of cyclodextrin and a placebo just at different times, and nobody knew which was which.
Okay, solid design. And what did they have to do after taking it?
2 back-to-back 20-minute CrossFit WODs, workouts of the day.
Oof. Yeah, WODs are no joke. Usually a mix of things, super intense.
Exactly. And they measured a ton of stuff. Reps in the WODs, heart rate, how hard they felt it was, grip strength, jump power, Wingate test for anaerobic power, even 1-rep max on bench press, plus blood sugar and lactate.
Wow. Yeah, comprehensive. So the big question, did the cyclodextrin group crush the WDs compared to placebo?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. No. They didn't find any significant difference in the number of reps they completed.
Really? No difference?
Nope. And also no major differences in perceived exertion or average heart rate during the WODs.
Huh. So, not the magic bullet for that kind of workout, it seems. Were there any differences in all those other things they measured?
There were a couple of, let's say, minor things. They saw a slight percentage improvement in jump power, the countermovement jump with cyclodextrin.
Okay, a little more explosive power.
Sort of, but when they adjusted for body weight or looked at actual jump height, that difference kind of vanished. So maybe not practically significant.
Okay. Anything else? Bench press.
They noted some differences in how fast people completed their bench press reps, but it was a bit complex and didn't point clearly one way or the other. Not really conclusive.
So overall for these CrossFit WODs, 30 grams of cyclodextrin just before didn't seem to move the needle much on performance or the main physiological markers.
Pretty much, yeah. That was the main conclusion for those specific tests.
Why might that be? Any ideas from the researchers?
They suggested a couple of things. One was the dose 30 grams. Maybe not enough. Some guidelines suggest more like 45 grams during exercise, potentially.
Okay. Dosage matters.
And the other thing is the type of exercise. CrossFit WODs, even though they're tough, are relatively short compared to, say, a marathon. They might function more like resistance training in terms of fuel needs.
Right, and carbs right before resistance training. The benefits aren't always as clear-cut as for long endurance stuff.
Exactly. The body might rely more on its immediate stored energy for those shorter, intense bursts.
How about that grip strength thing you mentioned?
Oh yeah, that was a bit weird. The cyclodextrin group actually showed a decrease in hand grip strength after the WODs.
A decrease. That seems counterintuitive.
The researchers guessed it might be due to faster use of local glycogen stores in the forearm muscles, like accelerated metabolism. But then that same group seemed less fatigued in the later sets of the bench press.
Okay, so kind of conflicting signals there.
Yeah, they basically called those findings inconclusive. Needs more looking into.
All right, so the CrossFit study using, it was beta-cyclodextrin, right?
Yes, HBCD, or beta-cyclodextrin.
Right, so 30 gram of that before short, intense WODs. Maybe not a game changer based on this one study.
Seems that way, yes. Now, that other study is quite different. It looked at alpha-cyclodextrin.
Alpha-cyclodextrin, okay.
Yeah.
And this is the one connecting to gut bacteria and endurance. Sounds fascinatingly different.
It really is a totally different angle. They were exploring this link between a specific gut microbe, Bacteroides uniformis, and endurance, and how alpha-CD might act as a prebiotic.
A prebiotic, like food for the good bacteria.
Exactly, something that selectively helps beneficial bacteria grow. So less about immediate fuel during the workout and more about, like, optimizing the gut environment over time.
Okay, so how did they even get onto this idea?
Yeah.
Bacteroides uniformis and running faster.
It started with an observation. They looked at long-distance runners and found a correlation. The runners who naturally had more B uniformis in their gut samples tended to have faster 3,000-meter race times.
Wow. Okay, correlation isn't causation, but that's definitely intriguing. Makes you wonder if boosting that bacteria could actually improve performance.
That was exactly the question they pursued. So they set up a human trial. Healthy, active men, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled again.
Good standard. What were the groups?
3 groups over 9 weeks. One got a placebo. One got flaxseed lignans. Apparently they contain some alpha-CD naturally. And the third group got pure alpha-cyclodextrin. ACD.
And the dose of the pure ACD.
This is key. It was only 200 milligrams per day.
Wait, 200 milligrams compared to 30 grams in the CrossFit study? That's tiny.
Tiny. Because the goal wasn't immediate fuel. It was about that prebiotic effect, subtly shifting the gut microbiome over weeks.
Right. Makes sense. So what did they measure after the 9 weeks?
They checked the levels of B uniformis in their gut, obviously, and they measured endurance with a 10K cycling time trial. Plus, they assessed fatigue after a standardized 50-minute bike ride.
Okay, moment of truth. What happened in the Alpha-CD group?
Well, first, it worked as a prebiotic. Their levels of B uniformis significantly increased by week 8.
Okay, so step 1 achieved. Did it impact performance?
Yes, significantly. The Alpha-CD group got faster in the 10K time trial compared to their own baseline, and also faster than the placebo group at the 8-week mark.
Faster 10K times.
Yeah.
That's a pretty direct endurance improvement. What about fatigue?
Also improved. They reported feeling significantly less fatigued after that 50-minute steady bike ride compared to how they felt at the start of the study.
Wow. So more endurance, less fatigue, and more of that specific bacteria.
Yeah.
That's quite compelling. Did they check things like VO2 max?
They did. And interestingly, VO2 max didn't significantly change in the Alpha-CD group.
Huh. So it wasn't making their aerobic engine bigger, necessarily, maybe more efficient, like exercise economy.
That's what the researchers suggested, yeah. Something beyond just maximal oxygen uptake was improving, which leads to the mechanism.
Did they figure that out?
Mm-hmm.
How does more B uniformis lead to better endurance?
They explored this more deeply using mouse studies. Mice given flaxseed lignans, or alpha-CD, also showed increases in B uniformis, and crucially, they could swim for longer before exhaustion.
Okay, so the animal results backed up the human findings. That strengthens the case.
It does, and in the mice, they looked at what was happening metabolically. The idea they proposed is that B uniformis produces specific short-chain fatty acids, or SCFAs, in the gut, mainly acetate and propionate.
SCFAs, I've heard of those. Gut bacteria make them from fiber, right?
Exactly. So think of B uniformis munching on the alpha-CD and churning out these SCFAs. These SCFAs can then travel to the liver.
And what do they do in the liver?
They seem to stimulate genes involved in energy production, specifically genes related to burning fat for energy, that's CPT1A, and genes for making new glucose, which is called gluconeogenesis, that's PCK1.
Okay, so the gut bacteria make helpers. The helpers go to the liver and tell the liver to get better at burning fat and making sugar during exercise.
That's the proposed pathway, essentially. It helps maintain blood glucose levels during prolonged exercise. They also saw signs that B uniformis might help the liver release its stored glycogen more effectively during exercise in the mice.
So it's like optimizing the body's fuel management system for endurance, driven by this specific gut bacteria that's fed by alpha-cyclodextrin. That is really cool and very indirect.
It is. The hypothesis is that by keeping those acetate and propionate levels up via B uniformis, you enhance the liver's ability to produce glucose, which helps sustain endurance.
Okay, so we have these two studies with seemingly quite different results. The CrossFit one with beta-CD showing minimal acute effects.
Right, at that 30-gram dose for that type of exercise.
And the endurance one with low-dose alpha-CD showing significant chronic improvements, likely via the gut microbiome.
Exactly. It really underscores that context is everything, doesn't it? The type of exercise, the intensity, the duration, they all demand different things from the body.
And the type of cyclodextrin mattered, alpha versus beta. Plus the dose and the timing, acute pre-workout versus chronic daily supplementation.
All those factors likely play a role. The CrossFit study authors even pointed out their limitations, like the fixed dose, only using men, the smallish sample size.
Good points. We need to be careful not to overgeneralize from that one study.
And similarly, while the endurance study showed that alpha-CD boosted B uniformis and performance improved at the same time,
It's still technically a correlation in the human trial, right?
Yeah.
They didn't prove the bacteria caused the improvement directly in humans.
correct. They didn't say give people B uniformis directly. That would be the next step to really nail down the causation in humans. The mouse data helps, but it's not definitive for people.
Okay, so wrapping this up for our listeners, what are the big takeaways on cyclodextrin?
I'd say two main things. First, alpha-cyclodextrin, used chronically at low doses, shows real promise for endurance. It seems to act as a prebiotic, boosting B uniformis, which might improve fuel management via the liver. Pretty exciting for endurance athletes.
Okay, promise for endurance via the gut. What's the second takeaway?
Second, for short, high-intensity stuff like CrossFit, the immediate benefit of taking beta-cyclodextrin, at least at that 30-gram dose, is much less clear based on current evidence. More research is definitely needed there regarding optimal dose, timing, and maybe even type.
Right, and that aha moment for me is definitely the gut bacteria link. The idea that feeding specific microbes could enhance athletic performance. That's a whole new way of thinking about sports nutrition, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It opens up this whole area of the gut microbiome as a potential target for performance enhancement.
So practically speaking, if you're an endurance athlete listening to this,
It might be worth looking into alpha-cyclodextrin, or generally focusing on gut health through prebiotics and diverse fiber intake. It's an emerging area, but the signs are intriguing.
and if you're more into HII or CrossFit,
Well, the tried and true advice about timing easily digestible carbs around your workouts probably still holds. We need more specific research on cyclodextrins for that context before making strong recommendations. Maybe higher doses, maybe different timing.
Okay, so here's a final thought to leave everyone with. Could fine-tuning our gut microbiome, perhaps using targeted nutrition like Alpha-CD, be the next big frontier in boosting athletic potential?
It really makes you wonder, right? What other connections are there between seemingly unrelated parts of our biology, like our gut microbes, and our physical capabilities? There's likely so much more to uncover.
Definitely something to keep an eye on as the research evolves. Fascinating stuff.